I grew up on an island in the Bahamas called New Providence. It's about 21 miles long and 7 miles wide. So it's a pretty small place. But there's a lot of people that live there who have big dreams. And when I was growing up, my big dream was to become an inventor. Now, I didn't know anyone who had that as a job title, but I remember being glued to the National Geographic Channel and loving watching shows like Mythbusters. So I knew that there was something in there that I wanted to do. In seventh grade, my science teacher took some time after class to tell us about this place called Silicon Valley. He told us that we should all consider becoming engineers who work at the forefront of technology. Now, I didn't have any family, and there was no one in my community who worked in a technical field, but my interest was piqued. So, what I did is I just went to Google like everyone else would do. Did a little bit of searching, but didn't really take it too far beyond there. Yet I still knew that I wanted to invent things. So I started searching for the nearest opportunity to do that. I eventually landed on a craft class that my principal hosted on weekends. So in eighth grade, I entered into the self-guided class and I decided, well, I kind of also want to be an airline pilot. So I built model airplanes from noodles and hot glue. Now, I know that might sound simple, but it was the first time that I brought a project from conception into reality, and I loved it. So naturally I did the exact same thing in 10th grade, but this time when I built my airplane, it was built from cardboard and tin tabs that people would use for roofing. I was lucky enough to go to a high school that had a vocational program. So I got my start in STEM by learning how to work on cars and doing residential wiring. So once I had the power tool skills and learned how to work with circuits, in 10th grade I built a human-powered generator with my science teacher and a few friends. We built this generator from an old exercising bike and a couple of old car parts. We entered into a competition and we said, hey, we want this bike and bikes like these to power every gym on the island. Now, of course, something in the back of my head told me that's probably not going to scale, but I didn't know anything about business to tell you why. We placed third nonetheless. But that was the seed of exposure that made my world so much bigger. So I decided to start joining more competitions, and I built a larger community of students until my school allowed us to start a club. And we used our club to expose seventh graders to some of the STEM projects we were working on. We built and experimented across many technologies, despite being limited by what we can use, since importing things to the Bahamas can get very expensive very quickly. We repurposed materials from old cars and electronics, and we used low-cost materials like PVC, plywood, and cardboard. So of course, once I got to college and I had so many more resources at my disposal, I'll admit, I was a little impatient. I wanted to build all these science and engineering projects, and everyone just kind of told me, hey, you're a little young. I tried to register for the senior and junior level design courses, and everyone just said no. No one would take me into their research lab, and an internship was out of the question. I remember being so frustrated by this, but I was still very impatient. So I did the only thing I knew, and I entered more engineering competitions. But the difference this time was I was joined by other frustrated freshmen. So convincing one friend turned to two, two turned to five, five turned to seven, until 2 years later, I found myself leading an engineering design organization of 80 members across 3 major projects. Now, no one just handed us the keys to the workshop. We, as freshmen, had to start from the bottom by working on concept projects that we took to pitch competitions for HBCUs. But we never fell outside of the top 2 positions. By that point, faculty and students started to pay attention. And as they paid attention, we expanded our ambitions to join events hosted by ASME, the US Department of Energy, and even NASA. And we did all of this by working out of a makerspace that just a few years prior was just a storage closet in the chemistry department. One of the things that we noticed as we attended these events was that our HBCU team represented nearly 100% of all the black students participating. When you consider the fact that employers are looking for students who have these kinds of experiences, it was very easy to see that black students were missing out on crucial learning and career opportunities that were all taking place outside of the classroom. So we didn't join just to get first place. Winning for us started to look like building a community of students that increased minority representation in STEM, while at the same time raising awareness for how to get a leg up early on in your career. Believe it or not, we were a very, very rare group of students. So my focus as a leader couldn't just be on rapid prototype iterations, but instead, we had to be very intentional about the collective learning and exposure that was happening within our group. As a result, 95% of our most active members went on to work at Fortune 500 companies, some went on to study at high-ranking engineering institutions, and others went into tech investing at venture capital firms. As for me, this community afforded me the opportunity to land internships in the robotics, automotive, cloud, consumer hardware, and deep tech investing sectors, all before I started my first full-time job out of college. So I guess in the end, I followed the advice of my 7th grade science teacher, and today I made my way over to Silicon Valley, working alongside a deep tech venture capital firm. And I'm not the only one from our group that ended up on the funding side of technology. Sometimes I look back at my experience and I think, would my journey have looked like this if I just followed the traditional path? The path where the only thing I did was go to class, study, get good grades. Would that have been enough? Probably not. Now that may seem obvious to some of you, but for people like me who come from a humble beginning and doesn't have parents that hold higher education degrees, we are much less likely to participate in extracurriculars. A lot of that is due to lack of awareness. Awareness of the exposure and the downstream career impact that these activities have. The tech industry is notorious for its lack of diversity, despite the fact that it underpins our daily lives. Now, although there have been recent efforts to ramify this issue, there needs to be more attention placed on the pathways that lead to these industries. We need to invest more in exposing students early on to STEM in our schools. I mean, we can do this in a range of ways. One way we can do this is by taking 15 minutes once a month just to cover exciting emerging science. Or, if you have the budget for it, we can purchase STEM kits and let students exercise their curiosities. For me, all it took was someone just telling me that Silicon Valley existed. For students out there who want to get involved in science and technology, my advice is very simple. Just build. And build alongside people who share your vision. I started with just a few friends in high school, and it grew into an entire community while I was in college, a community that we affectionately called Makeway, for obvious reasons. Together, we were all just trying to find ourselves within the technology industry, an industry where we weren't quite represented. And I don't think we would have gotten anywhere close to where we got if we tried to do any of that alone. None of that would have been possible without forward-looking faculty and staff who are willing to not only listen to our needs, but respond with mentorship along the way. Today, there are nonprofits and companies who are working together to tap into diverse talent, to tap in and reap the benefits that come with finally acknowledging an entire group of people who've been blatantly ignored. You know, our generation is facing some of the most urgent problems that the human species has ever faced. And I truly believe that we'd be better off if we decide to include more of the people whose life dream it is to be a part of the solution. Thank you.